everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Julie Schertz, and I'm a member of the Global Client Relations team at ETS, which is the organization that makes the TOEFL test. And today I'm going to give you a presentation and share lots of important information and details about the TOEFL test. I'll talk about what it is, what it measures, how you get your scores, how you send your scores, and I'll go over TOEFL test preparation materials to help you prepare and practice for the test. At the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session, so please feel free to submit questions if you have them as I go through the presentation. So let's start by talking about what the TOEFL test is. TOEFL stands for Test of English as a Foreign Language, and it's a test of English language for non-native speakers of English that's often used for admission into colleges and universities and academic programs where the courses or classes are taught in English. So it tests your listening, reading, speaking, and writing skills. TOEFL is currently used by more than 9,000 institutions, universities, agencies, organizations in 130 different countries. So it's a widely accepted English language test, and it's 100% academic. So the material is, it's based on your ability, or it's measuring your ability to use and communicate in English in an academic or a campus setting. In addition to being used for admission purposes, the TOEFL is used for some other reasons, which may include immigration departments sometimes use TOEFL to issue certain types of visas. Some medical and licensing agencies use TOEFL for certification purposes, and some scholarship programs, such as the Fulbright program, use TOEFL tests. The TOEFL test is given on set or predetermined dates at certified TOEFL testing centers all over the world. We have more than 4,000 TOEFL test centers in 165 different countries. So it should be simple for you to find a place to go to take your TOEFL test. In fact, we have more TOEFL tests than any other English language test out there. To find specific TOEFL test center locations, you can go to our TOEFL website at the URL that you see on your screen, and you can select a country or location or a broader region from our drop-down menu. And once you do that, you'll see a list of TOEFL test centers that are within those countries or regions. So you'll see the cities or states or provinces where TOEFL test centers are located. In addition, you'll see the dates for the TOEFL test in that location, as well as the cost or the registration fee of the TOEFL test in that location. And keep in mind, the registration fee or cost of the TOEFL test does vary depending on location. You'll also see the test format in that particular location. And there are two formats for the TOEFL test. There's the TOEFL IBT, which is the internet-based test. And as it sounds, that's given through the internet on a computer. And there's the TOEFL PBT, which is the paper-based test. And that's a paper-delivered test. Now, the PBT, or the paper-based TOEFL, is only administered in areas of the world where it's just not possible to take the test through the internet. So that would be places where there's just limited internet connectivity, or where it's difficult to sustain electric power. So these days, most TOEFL test takers take the TOEFL IBT, internet-based test. So since most people taking the TOEFL do take the internet-based test, that's what I'll focus on for the remainder of the presentation. So let's talk about the TOEFL IBT test format. I mentioned in the beginning that the TOEFL will test 4 skills: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So there will be a section on the test for each skill. And notice that you'll have a testing time for each section. So each test section has to be completed in a set amount of time or a limited amount of time. So time management is crucial when it comes to doing the TOEFL test. And your goal is to answer every question in the section before the allotted amount of time is over. You'll also notice there's a score scale for each section, so you'll receive a score of 0 to 30 points for each of the 4 sections of the test. And your section scores will be added together to come up with a total score. So you'll also receive a total TOEFL score that will range from 0 to 120 points. Now notice there is a 10-minute break. You will get a 10-minute break after the reading and listening sections are complete. During this break, the clock will stop, so you won't lose time to answer the questions on the test. If you choose to take a break when it's not a scheduled break, you may do so, but keep in mind you won't be able to stop the clock, so you will lose time to answer questions if you take a break when it's not a scheduled break time. So my advice to you would be only take a break during the scheduled break time. You can also take notes throughout the entire test if you would like. It's optional. Some people find note-taking is very helpful. We will supply you with scratch paper at the test center. That's just blank paper that you can write on to take notes. And you can replenish the scratch paper anytime you like, but keep in mind that your scratch paper that you use must be turned in at the end of the test. And we do that for security purposes. So why don't we take a closer look at each section so that you'll know exactly what you need to do in each section. So the reading section is going to be where you will read 3 or 4 passages. They will be short reading passages, typically about 700 words or so. And you will have to answer questions about the passages that you read, typically 12 to 14 questions about each reading passage. Now, the reading passages are from first year or freshman level academic texts, and you don't need to know any particular information about a certain topic or subject in order to do well in this section. Everything you need to answer the questions correctly will be contained in the reading passage. Now for the listening section, you will use a set of headphones. You will be issued a set of headphones at the test center, so you will put them on and listen to the questions in the listening section. And you're going to listen to lectures and conversations in this section. You will listen to anywhere from 4 to 6 different short lectures, and you'll answer 6 questions about each lecture. The lectures are typically 3 to 5 minutes long. You'll also have to listen to 2 to 3 conversations. They range in length from about 2 to 3 minutes. And then you will answer 5 questions about each conversation. Now, the conversations will be between 2 individuals, and they're always about a campus-based topic or situation. So an example would be 2 students talking about something that happened in class, or perhaps a student speaking with the librarian at the college library. For the speaking section, you are going to actually speak into a microphone. So you'll be issued a microphone at the TOEFL Testing Center, and it's going to record your voice in the speaking section. And there are 6 speaking tasks in total. 2 are independent tasks, and 4 are integrated tasks. So let me explain the difference between independent and integrated tasks. An independent task is a question that you will answer based on your own knowledge and opinion and experience. So there's not really a right or wrong answer. It's going to be based on what you think and how you feel. The integrated questions, on the other hand, are going to, you will need to integrate different skills. So what that means is you're going to use your different English language skills to come up with the response. So in your speaking integrated question, you're first going to read a short passage, then you're going to listen to a brief lecture. They will be about the same topic, and then you will need to speak your response based on what you've read and listened to. So that's integrating your skills, and we do that because that's exactly what you're going to do in an academic setting. When I was in school, I had to listen to my professor give a lecture, talk about it in class at my recitations with my classmates, and then write a paper to bring to the next class. So that's why integrating skills is important. Now for the writing section, you will have 2 writing tasks. One will be integrated, one will be independent. So I just explained integrated and independent on the last slide, but in case you don't recall, I'll go over it again. Independent is where you answer or you write your answer based on your own opinion and your own thoughts and experience. Whereas integrated is where you're combining different skills, different English language skills to write your response. So in your integrated writing section, you're going to listen to a lecture, you're going to read about the same topic, and then you're going to write the response based on the information that you've read and heard. You will be required to type your response using a standard English language keyboard. Some people call these a QWERTY keyboard or QWERTY keyboard. If you've never used a standard English language keyboard before, my advice would be to try to practice using one before the test. So we talked about what the test is and what it measures and what you need to do in each of the test sections. But let's talk about how you get started with registering for the test. So there are different ways that you can register to take the TOEFL. You can do it by telephone, by mail, but the fastest and easiest way is definitely online. So you can go to the website you see on your screen, TOEFLGoAnywhere.org, and you'll start by creating your own TOEFL profile. It'll be a personalized profile. You'll pick your username and password. Make sure that you choose something that you're going to remember, or if not, write it down and keep it somewhere safe, because you'll have to use your account again in the future. For what? Well, you're going to use it again to get your official scores after you take the test. You'll also use your account if you want to order additional score reports to send to universities after you've taken the test. You can also log into your account for a history of the tests that you've taken or score reports that you've ordered after you've taken the test. And if you need to update your account in any way, such as if your email address changes, you'll want to make sure that you update that in your account. Now, there is a slightly different registration process for students with disabilities and health-related needs, and there's a slightly different registration process for test takers in China, and you can find out about that on our website. So this is a really important slide. TOEFL identification requirements are exceptionally important, and here's why. When you go to your TOEFL test center on the day of your test, you'll be required to show an official valid identification document with your picture and your signature on it. That document that you show at the test center must match the name that you entered when you registered to take the TOEFL test. So when you're registering and setting up your TOEFL account, make sure you don't use a nickname or a shortened name or your first initial, because that's not going to match the name on your official identification document. And if your document doesn't match the name that you put into the TOEFL registration system, you may have a problem on test day. And in fact, you may not even be allowed to enter and sit for your test if there's a problem with your ID documents. You can read all about the identification requirements on the TOEFL website, which is TOEFLGoAnywhere.org, so I strongly encourage you to do that before the day of your test. If you have any questions about the identification requirements, or if you have a unique situation, say that you're a refugee or you only have a photocopy of your ID right now, you would need to clear that up with the ETS Office of Testing Integrity before the day of your test. And you can do that by emailing tsreturns@ets.org. So let's talk about your TOEFL profile. So again, if it's the first time that you're registering to take the TOEFL test, you'll need to start by building your TOEFL profile. And this is a screenshot of what that page looks like on the computer. So if it's your first time, you would go to the section that says New User and click the Sign Up button and create your TOEFL account. If you've already taken the TOEFL test and you've already created a TOEFL account, this is where you can sign into your account. You would simply put in your username and your password. Now, when you're ready to go ahead and register to take the TOEFL test, you'll log into your TOEFL account, and on your home page, in the section that says My Tests, you will click on the link that says Register for a Test / Order Score Reports. Again, notice that the test ID requirements are listed here on this page, and that's because they are very important. It is crucial that you follow the test ID requirement instructions and that you have a valid, acceptable form of ID that matches your name as you entered it into the system. So I mentioned that there are different test centers all around the world. So registering for a test is basically just reserving a seat at a specific test center on a specific day and time. So to do that, you're going to get to a screen that says Register for a Test, where you will choose your location and your dates. So the first step is choosing a location by your country or region, state or province, and different cities or areas within those states and provinces. And then you're going to put in your dates, and you can select a range up to 60 days. Once you put in that information, you will get search results with a list of test centers that have available dates, and you can choose one. If you don't get any search results, you may need to adjust your dates. It could be that you're choosing dates that are too far out and those dates haven't been set at the test center yet. So if it's 8 months before the test or the test date that you want, it may be too soon and you won't see dates yet. It could also be that you're selecting dates that are too close. So if it's maybe a week out, all of those test centers may be filled and maybe nothing will appear. So my best advice for you on this section is to try to choose your test center about 3 months ahead of time. That's when you'll have the most availability of test centers and dates. Another thing you may need to do if you've adjusted your dates several times is adjust your area. So you may want to select the next town or city or area closest to you and see if dates appear for that testing location. I also want to point out, actually, with the registration process, that if you already know which schools you would like to apply to, you can select schools to receive your TOEFL scores at the time of registration. And you would simply select however many schools you want to get your TOEFL score reports. And keep in mind that if you select your TOEFL score recipients as you register for the TOEFL test, you are entitled to receive 4 free score reports. Now, you can also send, speaking of scores, you can also send your score reports after you take the test, and those are called additional score reports. So what happens after you take the test is in about 10 days, you will get an email from ETS to let you know when your scores are ready. And as soon as your scores are ready and you get the email from ETS, you can log into your TOEFL account and view your scores. So this is a sample of what your test taker score report would look like. You'll see a copy on the screen of a sample report, so it shows your score for each of the 4 sections, as well as a total score. And you'll also see a description of your performance for each section of the test. Now, sending your score reports out, again, is a different process. You will have ETS, the makers of the TOEFL test, send your score report out to institutions that you designate or that you select, and will only send your score report out to the institutions that you choose. Again, you can do this before you take the test, anytime after you register and up to the day before the test. And if you choose that option, you will get up to 4 free score reports. Or you can choose to send them after test day by logging into your TOEFL profile and selecting the Order Additional Score Reports option. So whatever you want to do is up to you. You can do one or the other, or you can send scores or designate your institutions before you take the test and again after you take the test. Now, one question I get all the time is about score requirements. What is the score that will get me admitted into the institutions that I want to go to? And that is really not something that the TOEFL testing program mandates. Score requirements are actually set by colleges, universities, and programs themselves. So each school is different, and each school will have different TOEFL score requirements. And that's based on a number of different factors. One thing could be if the university or college has English language support on campus. So colleges with ESL or intensive English programs can sometimes set their TOEFL score requirements a little bit lower because they'll be able to help you become more proficient once you get onto the campus. Other schools that don't have any English language support services on campus may set higher TOEFL score requirements because they'll want you to come in already very proficient in English. If you have any questions about the TOEFL score requirements for the institutions that you're interested in, my best advice to you is to contact them directly and ask. A good starting place is to contact the admissions office and just clarify what their TOEFL score requirements are. So why don't we talk about some TOEFL resources now. These are resources for gathering information about the TOEFL test. And one excellent resource is our TOEFL Go Anywhere website. It's TOEFLGoAnywhere.org. And this website is just for TOEFL test takers. And it's a place where you can go to get all kinds of information about the TOEFL test. You'll notice there are colorful buttons on the website, so you can select or click on those buttons to get to different information that you would like to get about the test. There's also a register button, so you'll also go here when you're ready to register. And you'll notice in the right corner, you can click on FAQs. Those are frequently asked questions that other test takers have asked, so you may want to read through them before you go ahead and take the test. Now, our TOEFLGoAnywhere.org website contains the TOEFL destination search. And remember how I mentioned that each institution or college or university decides their own TOEFL score requirements. And this is where you can go to find out what those TOEFL score requirements are. So you can do that in one of two ways. You can search your institution by institution name. So if you know the name of the college or university you want to apply to, you can type it in, for example, Boston University, and you can see what their TOEFL score requirements are. If you don't know actual names, but maybe you've narrowed it down to an area where you'd like to study, you can also search by location. So for example, you could type in Boston, and a list of schools in the Boston area would appear, and you can click on them individually to see what their TOEFL score requirements are. Now, the TOEFL Search Service is a great resource if you're not sure which school you want to go to. It's a great way to help you find a university, college, or program that might have what you're looking for your academic experience. And you can opt into this TOEFL Search Service for free when you're registering to take the TOEFL test. And what that does is it puts you in a database that universities, recruiters use when they are recruiting students for their programs. So if you're a match for their recruiting profile, they will send you information about their school, about their programs, and their application process. We also have TOEFL resource centers, local TOEFL IBT resource centers in 15 different countries. And the benefit of the local resource centers is that for people who live in these areas, you can get in-language information in your same time zone. There's also TOEFL pages on Facebook now, and these Facebook pages are great because you can interact with other people who are studying for the TOEFL test or other people who have taken it. And we also post tips and information about the TOEFL on the Facebook pages, as well as information about local and upcoming recruiting events. There's also a TOEFL presence on Weibo for students in China who use Weibo. And we have a TOEFL TV channel on YouTube, which has dozens and dozens of helpful videos. Some of the videos are from ESL, or Intensive English Language Program teachers, who submit advice for practicing for the TOEFL. For example, they would teach you certain pronunciation techniques or help with your writing. So you can check those out if you're interested. There is also a video on the TOEFL TV channel called Inside the TOEFL Test, which is a video, or actually a series of videos, that goes into great detail about the speaking and writing sections. It goes over each question type, as well as techniques and strategies for how to answer those questions and how those questions are scored. We also have a Meet the Study Group series of videos. These are international students who have taken the TOEFL test, and you can see where they've gone with it and hear their study and practice tips. Now, if you don't use YouTube or you don't have access to YouTube, we also post the Inside the TOEFL Test videos on our TOEFL website in our TOEFL video library. So you can see the URL on the screen. And again, this is a series of 5 videos that really takes a close look at the speaking and writing section. It goes over the question types, strategies and tips for answering them, and how they're scored. For those of you who have never taken the TOEFL test before, you may be wondering exactly what happens on test day. So we have a very informative test day video where you can see exactly what happens on test day, from checking in at the test center to taking the test to signing out of the test center. You'll also get to see what an actual test center looks like. And you can see that at the URL that's on the screen. We have additional test day tips on the TOEFLGoAnywhere.org website in the plan section. So make sure you check out that too. And I want you to be aware that there is a TOEFL scholarship program that's available for students in certain locations. And it's recognizing students who have demonstrated academic achievement, leadership skills, and who have achieved English language proficiency as demonstrated by their TOEFL test scores. These are limited scholarships, and the money that you receive from these scholarships is paid directly toward tuition at a university or college that you choose. If you think you're interested in learning more about the TOEFL scholarship program, please go ahead and visit our website at ets.org/TOEFL/scholarships. So the last section of the presentation before we get to the Q&A session is test prep. I'm going to talk about official test prep items that are made by ETS, who are also the makers of the test. So we have some free TOEFL IBT test prep. One thing is the TOEFL test sampler. And this is just a sample or a few questions from each of the sections of the test, so you can get a better idea of what the questions are going to be like, and you can practice answering them. You can also get sample responses through the TOEFL test sampler to the writing and speaking sections. You'll receive the TOEFL test sampler automatically when you register for the TOEFL test. Now, the other items are available on the TOEFLGoAnywhere.org website, and that's the TOEFL Test Prep Planner and the IBT Quick Prep. The TOEFL Planner is a guidebook, and it's meant for you to start using it about 8 weeks before the day of your test, and it's broken down into weekly activities and exercises to really help you practice and build your skills for each section of the test. So it helps you build your reading, speaking, listening, and writing skills. The TOEFL IBT Quick Prep is a free tool where you can just get sample questions or practice questions for all sections of the test, and it comes with downloadable audio files so that you have the listening portion. And again, it's not a full practice test or a full-length test, but just a handful of questions from the different sections, so you'll have a better idea of what to expect when you take the test. In addition to our free test prep items, we also have test prep items available for purchase. We have the official guide to the TOEFL test, the official TOEFL IBT test with audio, TOEFL Practice Online, and we have TOEFL Value Packs, and I'll explain those in the next few slides. So the official guide to the TOEFL test is a guidebook that goes over all 4 sections of the test. It contains dozens of sample questions, and it contains 3 full-length practice tests. This is available in 2 formats, an ebook or an actual paper book that comes with a CD-ROM included. And the CD-ROM will give you the audio passages. The CD-ROM is compatible with Mac and PCs. Now there's the official TOEFL IBT test with audio. This is just a book of 5 different practice tests, so you can practice over and over and over with these 5 tests. It does include a CD for the audio portions, and this is only available as a paper book. It does come with an answer key and scoring guidelines so that you can take the tests and then score them yourself and see how you did. You can keep practicing and see if your scores are getting better. And my favorite practice test item is the TOEFL Practice Online. This is because it really simulates the actual test. You do it on your computer, and so you can do it anytime, anywhere. And it goes through all 4 sections of the test, but there's also half tests available if you just want to focus on speaking and writing, or if you just want to focus on reading and listening. These practice tests can be taken in a timed mode or an untimed mode. And timed mode really is the closest simulation to the actual test because you'll take it experiencing the same timed conditions that you'll experience on test day. You can also do it, as I mentioned, in untimed mode, and that will give you plenty of time to go through and answer every question. Whether you choose a timed or untimed mode, you will get scores and feedback about your performance. And I mentioned we have TOEFL Value Packs. If you think you would be interested in purchasing multiple test prep items, you may want to look into the Value Packs because they will save you money. It's basically, Value Packs are just combining different test prep items and being able to offer them to you at a discount. You will have an opportunity to purchase Value Packs when you register to take the TOEFL test. And I mentioned all of this is available online, so you can read more about Value Packs at TOEFLGoAnywhere.org. So that's the end of the presentation portion. And now I'd like to see what questions were submitted. So please bear with me as I read through your questions. So somebody says, the first question is, what to do to get 110 on the TOEFL? Well, that is a pretty specific score, and that's a rather high score, so there's really no hard and fast answer for how to get any certain score on the TOEFL test. But my best advice would just be to really practice. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to practice. Make sure you check out all of the free test prep materials. I would recommend doing the TOEFL Practice Online to see what your scores are, to look at the questions that you got right and that you didn't get right, and talk to other people who have taken the TOEFL to see what kind of tips they give. So maybe check out the TOEFL Facebook pages and see what kind of tips you can get there. And remember this, that a TOEFL test score is just a portion of your application, and your admissions officers at the schools that you're applying to will look at other parts of your application. So it's not just your TOEFL score that will decide your admission. So another question is, somebody said, hello. Is it possible for me to find full scholarships in any of the recommended universities? That's a question that I really wouldn't be able to answer, but the schools and universities that you're applying to might be able to answer. I know that some schools, depending on where in the world, aren't able to offer full scholarships for international students, but there are some schools that do. So my answer to this question would be definitely ask your schools and see what they say. And if you haven't signed up for the TOEFL search service, you might want to sign up or opt into the free TOEFL search service because you'll receive information from schools, including information about scholarships and financial aid. All right, another one says, when do you recommend to take the test? Thank you very much. You're welcome. You should take the test. I would say give yourself plenty of time before your application deadlines. So I would say to take the test at least 3 months before your earliest application deadline. That should give you plenty of time to make sure that you prepare, get your test scores, and have enough time to get your test scores sent out to the institutions that you want to apply to. Okay, somebody says, what is the cost of one additional score report? That's a great question. I didn't go over that during the presentation. So remember that you're entitled to 4 free score reports if you designate your school recipients as you register for the TOEFL test. If you've used up your 4 free score reports, you can purchase additional score reports for $19. Just checking to make sure that's right. Yes, that's $19 US is the cost of an additional score report. All right, somebody says how to register. So I think I did go over that, but I'll go over that again. You want to register about 3 months in advance of the day that you wish to take the test, and you'll register at TOEFLGoAnywhere.org. You'll click the button that says register now, and you'll create your profile and choose your test center and designate your score receiving institutions if you know who they are at that time. All right, another one says, where are you located? So I'm located at the ETS headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey, but I mentioned that we do have local IBT resource centers in 15 different countries. So if working with the ETS office in New Jersey is inconvenient because of time zone differences, please make sure you look into the local resource centers. That might be more convenient for you. Okay, where can I take the TOEFL test simulation? Right, the TOEFL test simulation is the test prep product or item that's called TOEFL Practice Online. You do that from your own computer, so you can take it anywhere, anytime you want. You could do it from your room, from your house, from a coffee shop, from a library. That would be up to you to decide where you want to do the TOEFL practice online. This one says, I think this is a question about registration and how the name appears on their ID documents. So again, make sure you read through that. This is all outlined on the TOEFLGoAnywhere.org website. If you click the round button that says Plan, you can see the TOEFL ID requirements. You can see a list of requirements that are acceptable and ID requirements or ID forms that are not acceptable. So make sure you go through that, and do keep in mind that identification requirements do vary by location or country. Some countries have different forms of ID than others. So when you go onto the website to read about the requirements, you can choose your country or location and read about the requirements in that specific location. Okay, this is a question that I thought I might get, how to choose between TOEFL and IELTS test. So the IELTS is another English language assessment test, and it is your decision which test you wish to take. But I do want to point out that the TOEFL test has more test centers than any other test. So it may be more available to you to find a TOEFL test center. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that I've talked to lots of different admissions offices, and we did a survey of admissions officers, at least in the US, and 4 out of 5 said they prefer TOEFL tests because they felt that the scores gave them more accurate information, and that they liked that the content is 100% academic and really does measure your ability to use and communicate in English in a college environment. Also, the TOEFL test is cheaper in most locations around the world than other English language tests. Okay, how many years does the TOEFL test last? That's a great one. I would like to clarify that your TOEFL test scores will be good for 2 years after the date that you take the test. So once you test, you will have 2 years to use those scores and send those scores out to institutions. After 2 years, your TOEFL test scores will expire and you will no longer be able to send them out to institutions. The reason TOEFL tests expire after 2 years is based on research that we've done that shows that your language ability and proficiency can significantly and is likely to significantly change after 2 years. So if you've taken the TOEFL test and then you've continued on with your English language learning and you've gone to a university and took classes in English, 2 years later, your English is probably going to be a lot better. So your TOEFL score won't really be reflective anymore of your skills and ability. On the other hand, if you stopped studying English after you took the TOEFL test, 2 years later, your English language skills would probably have diminished a little bit. Okay, another one is, I'm from Venezuela. Is there a TOEFL test center here? We do have TOEFL test centers in Venezuela, and I mentioned you can find a list of TOEFL test centers on our website. So if you go to TOEFLGoAnywhere.org, you can find a way to find where all the test centers are located throughout the world. Okay, another question. Sorry, this one is a little bit longer. If I didn't get the score I want, can I replace it with a new test score? Absolutely. You can take the TOEFL test as many times as you like. So if you take the test for the first time and you're not satisfied with the scores that you received, you can certainly take the TOEFL test again. We do have a testing policy, though, that you can only take the TOEFL test once every 12 days. So if you've tested, you won't be able to test again for at least 12 days. All right, this one says, for the speaking part, what will candidates be judged on? So for the speaking part, you're getting judged, again, on how well you can communicate in English. So they're looking at the clarity and your organization. Does what you say make sense? They look at the flow of your language. If you make a small mistake or if you have an accent, that's not going to lower your score. It's really just your ability to communicate your ideas in a well-organized manner. This question is, what is the cost of the TOEFL test? I had a feeling somebody would ask that. I mentioned that the TOEFL test price or the registration fee for the test does vary depending on your location. So there's different costs in different areas of the world. And typically, however, the costs range anywhere from about $160 US up into about $250 US. And I do want to point out once again that the TOEFL test is cheaper in most locations around the world than other English language tests. You can find the prices for the TOEFL test online at our website when you look into test center locations, and you can use that to compare costs if you wish. There's another question that says, what is a good score? So I mentioned that the score scale for the sections is 0 to 30. So the highest score you can get in any of the 4 sections is 30 points. And the total TOEFL score is 0 to 120. So the highest score you can get there for the total score is 120. But what is a good score, again, really does vary. It's going to depend on the places or the schools that you're applying to. So each school, program, university, college sets their own score requirements and is looking for a TOEFL score that they think works for their institution. So keep that in mind, and you will see that score requirements do vary quite a bit. Okay, there's a question in Spanish, and I am so sorry, but I don't really speak Spanish too well, so I don't quite understand it. All right, is there a way to register to a closed test date, let's say next Saturday? Okay, that's a good question. I did mention to give yourself a lot of time and register early, but I do understand sometimes that's not always possible. Maybe you just found out that you needed to take the TOEFL test and you need to scramble a little bit to meet a deadline. That's fine. If the TOEFL test center is closed, it could mean that it's full, and that means that the test center has reached maximum capacity. So each test center has a certain amount of seats, and once those are all taken up, they really just literally can't fit any more test takers into the test center. So if it's a closed test center, you may not be able to get in at the last minute, but if there's a test center that still has some seats available and you're registering close before the test date, you can do that. There is just a fee for late registration. So typically registration closes a week before the test date. If you want to get into the test within that time, there is just a late registration fee, and you can find those fees listed on the TOEFL website. Okay. Another one, oh, somebody sent me a nice compliment, thank you. How many times, another one says, how many times can I take the test? So again, you can take the TOEFL test as many times as you wish, but not more than once in a 12-day period. This is a question that I thought somebody would ask as well. Paper or IBT? So I want you to know that, I want to make this really clear, that it's not a choice. So you don't decide, do I want to take it on paper or do I want the internet-based test? That's not really how it works. It's depending on your test center location. So you're going to, again, I mentioned you'll find an actual TOEFL test center. And some test centers are going to deliver the TOEFL test on the internet-based test. And a very small percentage of TOEFL test centers in certain parts of the world are only going to be able to offer the TOEFL as a paper-based test. So it's really going to be that you'll take the test in the format that's delivered at the test center that you're going to. And I mentioned that a majority of test takers these days get the internet-based test, or they are administered the internet-based test. So I hope that's clear. All right. How soon do I get my scores is the next question. So I want to clarify, you don't get your TOEFL scores on the day of the test, and that's because we have a pretty rigorous scoring process, and your TOEFL test sections are actually, some of them are actually scored by human beings who rate your test, and so this takes a little bit of time in order for them to carefully score your test. But we want to do it quick, so we do get your scores back to you within 10 days. So typically 10 days after you take the test, you will be able to get your scores. Now, as far as getting scores to institutions, if you designate the institutions who you want to send your scores to at the time that you register for the test, those institutions will also get your TOEFL test scores about 10 days after you take the test. All right, this is a test taker in Zimbabwe. So again, you would use the TOEFL Go Anywhere website to find or locate test centers and see if there are any located in Zimbabwe. All right. Another one is, I don't have any university in mind right now. Can I send my score later when I decide? Absolutely. So I mentioned your TOEFL test scores will be valid for 2 years, so you can send your scores out for the next 2 years after you take the test. So it's okay if you don't know which schools you want to apply to at the time that you register or at the time that you take the test. Some people know what schools they want to apply to at that time, other people don't, so that's fine. You can always go in after the test date by logging into your TOEFL profile and ordering additional score reports to go out to institutions. So don't worry if you don't know the schools that you want to apply to after your test, before you take the test. Okay, somebody said thank you so much. You're welcome. I really hope this helped. I'm glad. Okay, somebody said if you have a hearing impairment, can you still take the test, or how do you take the test if you are hearing impaired? Yes, we do have accommodations for test takers with disabilities or health-related services. So we would certainly try to make accommodations for you to be able to take the TOEFL test, but you would need to work with the ETS Disability Services Department, and they have special registration forms that you would fill out in order to take the TOEFL test. You can email them or visit the website. So I would go to TOEFLGoAnywhere.org and read about conditions for test takers with disabilities or health-related needs. Okay, another question about the difference between IBT and ITP. This is a student in Brazil. So the IBT is the internet-based test, and that is the test that's used. It's administered in a very secure TOEFL testing center, and the IBT test is what's used for admissions into universities and colleges throughout the world. The ITP is the institutional testing program, and that's a little bit different because that test is not administered under the same secure conditions. It's not administered in certified testing centers. So the ITP was not necessarily created as a test to be used for admissions, but rather for placement and progress purposes, to measure placement in English language programs and progress with your English language learning. So I hope that explains the difference. Okay. This is a question, university admissions depends much upon GRE or TOEFL. I do want to point out GRE scores, that's the graduate record exam that's used for graduate admissions at many universities, and TOEFL are important. Yes, they are important pieces of your application, but we do have score user guidelines for institutions that use GRE and TOEFL scores. And the guidelines are that these scores should always be used combined with other parts of your application. So really, applying is a holistic process, and admissions officers really do look at all parts of your application. So if all of the pieces of your application are very strong, you'll have a strong application. I hope that sort of helps clarify that. All right. Why does the required TOEFL IBT score depend on the university? Well, that's, again, I mentioned there's lots of different factors. One thing could simply be, does that university have English language support services available? If so, they can set a lower TOEFL score and admit you under the condition that you practice and you do English language classes before you enroll in mainstream courses. Other schools don't have the ability to offer English language classes or intensive English classes, so they'll need you to be proficient, and so they'll want to see a higher TOEFL score. Other schools actually sometimes look at your section score, so it could be if you're applying to a program that's very writing intensive, they may just want to look at not only your total score, but your writing score, and they may have a requirement or a minimum required score in your writing section. Or there could be other programs that are maybe more speaking intensive, and so they might be more concerned with your speaking score, and they might want to see a minimum speaking score. So that's really why each institution is different. There's other reasons, but there's just too many to go over right here. All right, this says, what is the best book to prepare for the TOEFL test? I did mention we have the official TOEFL guide, so I would have to say the official guide to the TOEFL test. And again, that's because it goes over the test in really great detail It talks about all 4 sections, gives an example of all of the questions, has lots of sample questions for you to practice, and it comes with scoring rubrics and scoring guides so that you'll know how to get a higher score, what a high score response looks like. So that would be a great place to start. All right. Are there any restrictions in terms of the number of institutions I can send my scores to? No, you can send your TOEFL scores out to any institution in the world that you want to send your scores to. We do have a list of TOEFL score users. These are what we call TOEFL destinations or universities that have TOEFL codes. And there's a huge list of them, and you can choose any that you would like. There really is no set limit. All right. Does TOEFL really impact my university admission? Well, I think that it does, because remember, if you're trying to get into a program where your courses are going to be taught in English and you have to do your coursework in English, those programs will want to make sure that you're going to have the ability to speak English and to communicate and use English so that you'll be able to succeed in your courses. So obviously, if you want to take a course taught in English, but your English language skills aren't very proficient, it might be hard for you to succeed in that class. So I would say that your TOEFL scores really do have an impact on your admission. And again, you could certainly talk to your admissions officers at the schools that you're looking into to see what their thoughts are about that. All right. Do you offer the TOEFL online? So I'm not sure what exactly what that means. We have the TOEFL practice online, so that's the TOEFL practice test that you can take online. Another way that the TOEFL might be considered online is the actual TOEFL IBT test, which is the TOEFL test that's delivered through the internet at secure testing centers where you're assigned to a computer station. Hi, in the speaking section, is it better to speak with an American accent? Actually, no. It's really, if you have an accent if you have an accent, it's okay. Our test raters, the individuals scoring your test, understand that English isn't your native language. And of course, they understand that you may have an accent. So having a slight accent is fine. It's not going to weaken your score as long as you can be understood. So a slight accent really is not going to be an issue, and you shouldn't try to speak with any American accent. That's not necessary. Also, writing. If you spell words a certain way, or if you spell words in a British spelling, that's fine too. Our raters understand that we have test takers from different parts of the world, so they won't lower your score if you spell words using a British spelling or another type of spelling. Is it true that final scores have to satisfy a condition so that those scores are equivalent to other tests taken previously? I'm actually sorry, but I'm not sure what this question is saying, so I'm going to skip it for now, but please feel free to email that question to TOEFL@ets.org. That's TOEFL@ets.org, so that somebody can answer that for you. I'm just not exactly sure what you're asking. I apologize. All right. Why can't students who register obtain the study materials for free? Well, you can. So I mentioned we have free test prep materials that you can access through our website. So that's the TOEFL Planner and the TOEFL Quick Prep. And then you'll also get the TOEFL Sampler automatically for free when you register for the test. So there are items that are available to you for free. In addition to those items, we do have the videos that are posted in the TOEFL video library. And if you have access to Facebook, you can also get more test prep information there. Okay. I would like to know if I can choose which scores to report to universities. Yes, you can choose which scores you want to report to the universities. So what happens is each time you take the TOEFL test, that's called a test administration, and it's based on the date that you've tested. When you send your scores out, you can log into your TOEFL account and you can choose which test date or which test administration you would like to send out to institutions. So yes, you do have the ability to pick which set of your scores you would like to send out. Okay. Again, how do I register for the test? I did explain that, but just go to TOEFLGoAnywhere.org and hit the little button that says register now. Okay. And then this question is, does the word count in the writing really matter? Well, the word count is important. There's not any particular amount of words or number of words that you must use, but you need to make sure that you write enough so that you're able to really develop your thoughts and support your thoughts and opinions with information. So if you just write one sentence, you're not going to write enough to really strengthen the thought that you're trying to get across. A good thing for you to do would be to look at our website and look at sample writing responses so you can see what a writing response with the highest score would look like, as well as a writing response with the lowest score would look like, so you can compare what those writing responses are like. All right, I think we're just about done today. We're running out of time, but thank you so much for being part of this webinar. If I didn't get to your question, I'm really sorry that I didn't get a chance to answer it, but please feel free to email TOEFL@ets.org with any questions that I didn't get a chance to answer today. Thank you so much.